Hey, how's it going, everyone? And welcome back here to the FilmSpeak channel for our weekly WandaVision reviews, recaps, breakdowns, whatever you want to call it. Today, we're going to be talking about WandaVision episode number 8, the penultimate of the series. And it is a series. This is not, going to come back for a second season or anything. So this is it. We only got one more episode left of WandaVision. But hey, if this is your first time checking out the FilmSpeak channel, we like to say that this is the place where the conversation continues after the credits. And of course, we'd love to have you be a part of that conversation. So consider subscribing to the channel for more insight, analysis, and interviews behind your favorite pieces of entertainment. I see some people are in the chat right here chiming in. Keep that going. Let us know what you thought of last night's, or I guess I keep saying last night, but today's episode of WandaVision, either in the chat if you're watching us live or in the comments section below on the replay. Let's get a great conversation going in there. Let us know what thoughts and theories you have left, because like I said, only one episode left. There's not a whole lot left to sort of speculate on. There's only, we kind of see what the direction of where the show is going. And so, yeah, but anyways, let's have a great conversation down there as well. But I am not doing this alone. I am, of course, joined by the great Elliott from Movie Files. Elliott, how's it going, man? Oh, you good?
There we go. There we go. We're all good. Previously on, but no, we are all set, man. We got the 8th episode, man. What an incredible episode. What a great origin story. Some of my favorite origins of the MCU so far, man. And I know you said this might be the series finale, but Kevin Feige said the other day, man, you can never say never with Marvel anymore. So who knows, man? We might get a spinoff or a Agatha Harkness spinoff or something, man. But no, I'm excited to be here to talk about this incredible 8th episode.
Yeah, for sure. And we also have a special guest today. We are joined by Owen from Owen Likes Comics. Owen, buddy, it's great to have you on here. How are you doing?
Hi, how are we? I don't know how I ended up here. I think I slipped through the cracks of the multiverse. I think there was some chaos magic going on, but I'm here, so I guess I will join you two fine gentlemen for this review.
Yeah, full disclosure, Owen did bully me into coming on this episode. He said, "Hey, you're going live, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Good, I'm going to join." And I was like, "Oh, okay, all right." that works. But let's before we go deep into the weeds of this thing, let's just give overall impressions of this episode. First of all, as a penultimate, did it do everything that a penultimate episode should do in a series like this? Did what we got from Wanda and the sort of origin story, as Elliott alluded to, was that emotionally satisfying? I've seen some criticisms of it that people felt like it was just retreading stuff that we already knew and over explaining per se. But I kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on it, starting with you, Elliott. What did you make of this episode?
Yeah, no, man, I'm in a complete different camp in regards to, I thought this episode was fantastic. It's my favorite episode of the season so far, and literally some of my favorite MCU content that we've gotten in this entirety of this 13-year stretch that Marvel's been on. But this episode, to me, I mean, yes, in a traditional sense, it didn't necessarily push the narrative forward in regards to, Mephisto and obviously Pietro and all that stuff. But to me, this is the heart of the story. This is the gist of the story. It's Wanda's grief. And this didn't necessarily retread anything. We've never seen any of this footage before. Yeah, it was alluded to of her being experimented on with Pietro. Yeah, we heard a little bit of her parents in this season, in this show in particular. But this is brand new footage. This is brand new territory. We also learned that Wanda has always, as we got last week, has been Agatha all along. Wanda's had these X-gene-ish type of abilities since she was a little girl. So this episode was fantastic, and it was so much detailed information in those flashbacks, as well as Agatha Harkness, her origin stories. We talked about the predictions last week in regards to seeing her at the witch trials, which are somewhat altered from the comic books, but who did Agatha get the hunch from to experiment with the dark matter, dark magic? So this episode to me, man, was, again, not only some of my favorite origin stories that we've gotten in the MCU with Agatha as well as Wanda, but just, again, talking about the grief and how I, as a real-life person, can relate to these fictional characters and how Wanda goes to television, goes to sitcoms to escape her realities. It's something I do all the time, something we all do. We're watching WandaVision right now. So it was just so much great stuff that I love from this episode, and this is my favorite episode of the season.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree with you on that. I did tweet out last night. I was like, yeah, this one really floored me. But Owen, do you have do you kind of share in that same sentiment? Did it deliver for you? What were your sort of overall impressions of the episode?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to just echo what Elliott said. I don't know if it was my favorite episode, but it's definitely in my top three. And given that I kind of had mixed feelings on last week's episode, like I don't think there's been a bad episode in the entire show so far, but last week's episode kind of felt as close to filler as we've had in the show. So, we've only got two left, so we really had to get things moving. And, we all kind of had the inkling that this episode was going to include a lot of flashbacks. So I was slightly hesitant going into it, but easily one of the best episodes of the show so far. And like Elliot said, it's one of the best things the MCU's put out. In recent memory, at least, the way that it kind of, through the flashbacks, interweaves with the things we've seen through Wanda's arc in the other films, the kind of the gaps that we already have in the show that's been filled in, and learning more about Wanda's past, learning more about Agatha's past. I thought it was an incredible episode, and it added things to the show that I didn't know I needed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like
I thought
what,
I had
guess.
a pretty good picture of what the show was before this episode.
Yeah.
It's filled in so many interesting things that I feel now I have such a richer understanding of everything that's going on. And yeah, like you guys said, it just completely floored me.
Yeah, that's a great point of like saying that you thought you knew where the show was headed before this episode, because I think a lot of us did sort of feel that way. I mean, like literally, I mean, I've been teasing it, but I've been working on like a WandaVision video essay type analysis, and I thought I had this thing nailed down. I was like, okay, great, I'm not gonna have to make any more edits. I could just record it and just like put it out there. And then this episode comes, and it really does throw me for a loop. Especially with the obviously we're going to discuss spoilers here, but obviously the stuff learning about what happened between her and Vision, how she didn't actually steal Vision from Sword, how she went in there wanting a proper burial for him, and was denied that. And then learning that Hayward and Sword were just piggybacking off of her grief and everything that was sort of happening in order to create their own vision, the White Vision, which they're going to use as a weapon of mass destruction and everything. So like there's a lot of, I agree with you, there's a lot of just sort of like interesting things that were presented in this episode. And again, I'll echo what you guys said. With people saying that it's retreading familiar territory, I couldn't disagree more. I think it's contextualizing that stuff, and it's offering a more well-rounded view of what actually happened. It's like you could say, oh yeah, we hid under a bed for 5 days while a bomb that we thought was going to go off was in front of us. You can say that, and I guess in the way they said it in Age of Ultron, it does carry some emotional weight, but actually seeing it in context of like this story was terrifying. And like knowing that like while all this was going down, the only thing that kept her and Pietro like sane was just like knowing that Dick Van Dyke was on the TV like right over there in the corner. I mean, that's some really profound storytelling right there. And I don't think it over-explained everything. It was actually kind of light on dialogue, like for the most part it was just Wanda kind of wandering around and confronting the trauma and the grief that she has been, avoiding for so long. And then the moments of dialogue that we do get are so beautiful and so just like human. This stuff between her and Vision at the Avengers compound and everything. That might be one of my favorite moments out of the entire MCU. It's just so, it's incredible. And so, yeah, I don't really understand. I mean, I get where people are coming from because it is going back in time in order to go forward, but it's necessary and it's incredibly emotional storytelling.
It reminds me a lot of a show that floored me last year with Watchmen, in regards to halfway through the season we got the flashback episode with Sister Night and kind of understanding Justice Hood and all that stuff, and we didn't necessarily move the story forward, but we learned from the past, and how we were able to get to the past or get to the future was to go in the past. So I always love when shows do that, when they execute kind of those flashbacks and kind of gives you context of what's going on in the real timeline. But again, just going to just Wanda and her being able to use this as a coping mechanism as an early age in regards to watching Dick Van Dyke, watching, Malcolm in the Middle as a way of learning English, but also it was important for her and her family to come together as like a family night. So again, like you said, Griffin, in Age of Ultron, we get it. You can understand what she meant by that, the hatred she has towards Tony Stark, but seeing that moment, being in that moment with her and her family, the Hex, learning that she has these abilities from the very beginning, was so important for this character. And again, this speaks to what I love about what these TV shows are going to give us is the long format of understanding these characters, dive into their psyche, dive into their past, and really fleshing them out. So when we see her again in a potential Spider-Man No Way Home, or of course in Doctor Strange 2, we have just as much love for the character as we did from previous iterations of the performance by, Elizabeth Olsen.
Yeah. Well, and here's the other thing, we've like, given the way, Wanda and Pietro were introduced in the MCU, they were introduced in an Avengers movie. And so it's like, we don't have enough time to really go back and like explore them as people and really like get to the root of like who they are and like the problems that they've gone through in the life that they had and like their wants and desires and stuff like that. We got that with like, the big three, and we got that with some of the other characters, but we haven't gotten that with her or Vision really. And both of them were introduced in Age of Ultron. And so for them to take this episode and give us like a true origin story of Wanda, and with it ending with her being considered this myth by other witches that are out there, this Scarlet Witch. I mean, that just, it really brought everything like full circle there, and it was like, this is the definitive Wanda Maximoff Scarlet Witch origin story. It's like, yeah, all that stuff happened in the past, but like this is the arrival of Scarlet Witch. And I thought that was such a brilliant way of advancing her character.
And isn't it so cool, though, that we were able to use these shows to, I don't want to say erase the past, but and not necessarily retcon things, but just to flesh things out, which I think is just so great about what we're getting with this show.
Yeah, for sure. Owen?
Yeah, I feel the same. I think that what it does really well is, like you said, it doesn't retcon necessarily or erase things, but it adds so many more dimensions to the things we thought we already knew about Wanda's character. And it's funny, I like the comparison Elliott made, comparing it to that episode of Watchmen, which is probably my favorite episode of that show, to be honest, the Hooded Justice episode. But with this one, and it's interesting because obviously the way that they set up Agatha's character at the end of the last episode, it came across as very kind of mustache twirling evil villain. This episode, the way they presented kind of Wanda's journey through her own past, in a way it kind of felt like therapy. It was a really interesting way of presenting it. And like you said, this kind of storytelling, you don't expect it to go backwards in order to go forward, but in a lot of ways that's what therapy is. In order to kind of progress, you have to go backwards and learn things about yourself that you didn't quite realize. And in a lot of ways, that is kind of what happens to Wanda throughout this episode. And by the end of it, where we get the Scarlet Witch cliffhanger, if you will, we're kind of seeing, like Griffin said, a more fully formed version of the kind of the character from the comics that we know. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time that she's ever been considered Scarlet Witch. I mean, we've always called her Scarlet Witch, but like she's always been Wanda. She's never been, her superhero alter ego, whatever, title or whatever, her comic title. This is the first time that we heard someone call her the Scarlet Witch, which I think is, I don't know, it added that extra layer of like oomph. I'm like, yeah, it's a fan servicey moment, but it's also fan service done right when you look at the journey that she's sort of gone on. Which I just think is great.
Look at the episode earlier in the season where Director Hayward's like, any known aliases, any alter egos, and they're like, no, we finally got it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's that was just like it was a really cool and like it was a very well earned moment. I want to go back to Agatha Harkness though, because you bring up an interesting thing, because that was exactly what I was afraid of at the end of last week's episode, was that she was just going to be this mustache twirling villain, pulling the strings or acting, as like second banana to like a Nightmare or a Mephisto type character, which, one of them, they could be the big bad of Doctor Strange 2, and it's looking like that'll probably be the case. And Agatha might have ties to them, but it's really looking like this show is going to be be about Wanda, and Wanda, basically having to like confront the trauma and the inner demons of herself. And I think that's such a bold move for them. And I'm glad that in this episode, it wasn't, Agatha Harkness like offering her up to like, one of the million big bads that they could have had. It was her, like you said, taking her through therapy, because she's trying to, she's manipulating her, or she's feeding her grief, and she's trying to play off of the fragile state that she's in order to learn how she did all of this stuff. Like, she's just trying to, I don't want to say leech off of her powers, but just like, the fact that she didn't have like the training that Agatha went through, or the fact that she didn't learn all this stuff that Agatha did and was able to just do it like that, the chaos magic, as she refers to it. I think she's like, what's your secret? It's like, I got to know this. She's like obviously a very power hungry person. And I think that's, obviously in a more heightened sense, that's a more like realistic and relatable way of like approaching a story about grief. You're going to have people who are obviously trying to manipulate and use you, unfortunately. And this is like a very compelling way of doing that, I think.
Han, I mean, we've said it so many times this season. She has been so incredible this entire season. I really, fingers crossed, that they don't kill her character off for the season finale, because I think she's one of my, I want to say not top 5 or top 3, but she's definitely in that upper echelon in regards to MCU villains. Again, just seeing her perspective of kind of paralleling to Wanda, and she has some alternative motives, but she was wanting help from the Mother Witch. She wanted help from her coven, but they kind of deemed her as kind of like Wanda, as, the Avengers might look at Wanda at times, and definitely Director Hayward as somewhat of a villain. She didn't necessarily have maybe, who was the person that maybe pushed her in direction to messing around with the dark magic, to playing around with the dark matter. Who was that particular character? And that's something I would love to explore. But there is something to be said about Agatha and the performance by Kathryn Hahn regarding just, I really hope that we get some type of mentorship with Agatha, with Wanda, maybe throwing in, Doctor Strange in the mix, because I think there's definitely a great opportunity to really explore Agatha, and not really necessarily feeling she can be comfortable around other people like her, but then seeing someone like Wanda with these ultimate powers, we'll see what comes of that relationship.
Yeah, for sure. Owen?
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I kind of had worries about how she was going to be handled in this episode, given the way they kind of set the reveal up in the last episode. Worked for me, but I thought it could have been done in less clunkier ways, I guess is the best way to phrase it. Because you have to remember, and I think what this episode did really well, and the way the relationship worked out, was Agatha isn't necessarily a villain in the comic books. She's mostly a mentor to Wanda. And while it's kind of, like you said, you get that sense that she's trying to manipulate Wanda and kind of learn and kind of siphon her powers or whatever, that kind of mentorship is kind of there in that episode, but in a more kind of twisted way, which I thought was really good.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that is a good point, because it's like she isn't strictly like an evil person out for. I mean, she obviously has her own agenda and stuff for sure, and there's like, she can't necessarily be trusted, but you're right. She is like, in the comics, she is more of a mentor figure, and you definitely get that here, but it's like, it's driven by like ulterior motives for sure. So, well, and again, that's sort of like, I think Thought Theater here in the chat, which, great to see him. He says, which I think this is really a great point. It's one of the reasons why I like the show. I really like that there's no clear villain yet. Still, everyone thinks the other is the big bad, and that's really the interesting part about this, is because it's like, if you're on the outside looking in and you're seeing all this stuff that Wanda's doing, you're going to feel threatened, and you're going to see her as a villain kind of character. But I think when you get inside the hex and you see everything that she's gone through, and you take a more close-up look, you'll see that like she's as much the victim as like, the people in Westview that she's sort of like unintentionally holding hostage and stuff like that. And so it really just comes down to like her having to give up that which she built in order to cope, for the greater good. And now, obviously, with the White Vision in there, there's going to be some sort of like conflict, physical conflict, where it's like her and Vision, I'm assuming, are going to have to fight the White Vision, in order to like save the day and stuff like that, for lack of a better phrase. But
and something to that comment too, about, and like you just mentioned, perspective. Every character has that kind of different angle in regards to putting yourself in that person's shoes, right? Whether it be Wanda looking at Sword and Monica and her, thinking they're attempting to take her out, reversing the tables with, how director Hayward, which I'm still to think that this is kind of a Tony Stark 2.0 in a certain sense. Again, coming from director Hayward's perspective, the last 5 years, we lost to Thanos. We didn't have protections. The Avengers essentially lost. Now he's kind of, again, Age of Ultron, he's having his own Tony Stark moment where he doesn't necessarily see, this villainous ways of bringing in this sentient robot to protect the world. He thinks it as an armor of shield, as Tony Stark would say. So there's so many different, Pietro could be said about that. When we first, Jimmy Woo can be looked at as a villain in regards to a sword agent. So it's always just, like you just mentioned, it's always different perspectives of how these people are kind of misunderstood and getting their point of view of the situation. So I love just the meta nature of every character has another layer or another understanding of where they're coming from, which the show is doing a beautiful job at displaying that.
Yeah, for sure. I do see we have a super chat here in the chat from Michael. Thank you so much, man. Saying the cinematography in this episode was amazing. Yeah, it was a really well shot episode for sure. I mean, the show has always like on the technical level been really like up to par with the films and whatnot, but this episode for sure, as it sort of like went through the different time periods and like the VFX and like the use of the Soul Stone and everything, it was a very visually striking episode for sure. I guess, well, where do you guys want to kind of pivot to next? I mean, obviously we could start speculating about, the white Vision and all that stuff like that and what that could possibly mean, and sort of the tragedy that is Vision's life now, which is that like he was like, I want to be treated as human. I don't want to be resurrected. And of course, knowing, government agencies with a militaristic view, they're going to resurrect him. And so it's like he's brought back to life as this weapon of mass destruction. I mean, what do we think is sort of like going on in there? I mean, is there like some Ultron in there, or is it like something completely new? And the most important thing, will he be voiced by James Spader, or is Paul Bettany going to do the voice?
Yeah, I think we've been speculating for weeks now that we would imagine, or at least hope, that we get some type, because it seems like the catalyst for this show has been Age of Ultron. A lot of the stemming of the character development and all this stuff came from Age of Ultron. So it only makes sense that the big bad from Age of Ultron would make some type of appearance, which I can see, as you just mentioned, James Spader as this new white Ultron or white Vision version, which kind of in the comics with Vision's quest, Hank Pym was able to somewhat bring him back to the Vision that we know, but, he wasn't completely the Vision, which can speak to in this MCU. We have Shuri, who's had her run-ins with Vision. Obviously we have Bruce Banner that can maybe bring this character back, but I think you alluded to it, Griff, that we're going to see this big bad villain, or to say this battle between the Hex version of Paul Bettany going against his white version of Vision, which, speaks to maybe that cameo we've been talking about for weeks of him working with someone he's been wanting to work with since he was a little kid, which would be pretty cool, which it is himself, which would be pretty amazing. But I'm to assume that Ultron, fingers crossed, will make some type of appearance next week.
I would just kill to see, just to hear James Spader's voice again, just as something, just because I love
strings on me.
Yeah, it's so good. I don't know. What do you make of the white Vision? I mean, do you think that it's just going to be anything other than, just the big bad villain or whatever, or do you think that they're actually going to do something with it going forward? Because like what Elliott said, I mean, maybe this is a case where it's like Wanda has to say goodbye to the Vision that she knew, but then going forward, it's like this new Vision that was again created as a weapon sort of like takes on another life of its own.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to say on that regard. First off, is Paul Bettany the best troll in Hollywood? He's had everyone on strings, no pun intended, for months now. I've seen people going through Paul Bettany's entire filmography and like crossing off, okay, he's worked with this actor, he's worked with this actor. I had Al Pacino as Mephisto.
Same.
That was my one that I was kind of pining on for months. But it's like, I was reading a quote from him this afternoon where he was talking about like, when I finally got on set with this actor, we had such kind of explosive chemistry. It was like we were always destined to work together. And it's like, because they've hyped this up so much, and Elizabeth Olsen has talked about it as well, about this incredible actor that's on the show. And it was almost like they were hyping it up to such epic proportions that it had to be a troll. It had to be a bit of a
yeah.
And if the whole time Bettany's talking about himself, that's hilarious.
Oh, it's so funny.
As for the White Vision stuff, I think something you were touching on then, Griffin, was the idea of Vision saying, when he died, he wanted to basically be left to rest. He didn't want to be resurrected. He didn't want to become a weapon or become something else. And what's interesting is he's been brought back twice. He's been brought back by Wanda and he's been brought back by Sword. But it's kind of like for different purposes. Wanda's brought him back because of love and the fact that she doesn't know how to go on without him.
Yeah.
Whereas Sword have brought him back because they need another weapon because, we don't have Tony Stark anymore. So it's that interesting dichotomy of, and obviously from what we infer in the last episode, it's not Vision that we've been following throughout the show. It's kind of a construct of Vision from Wanda's memories. But still, that's still Vision to Wanda, and Wanda's the kind of perspective we've been following through the show. So while it may not be Vision physically, in the world that she's living in, and this show follows kind of her attempts to deal with grief, to her that's Vision. And it makes a lot of sense. I was thinking back to the episode where he tries to escape the hex and he's kind of disintegrating and his pieces are flying back into it. And I was quite confused by that at first, but now realizing that he was created inside the hex, that whole scene takes on an entirely new context for me. That's why, when we've seen other characters leave the hex or other characters enter the hex, nothing like that's happened to them. But when Vision leaves, because Vision, it's almost like something that was created in the hex can't leave the hex.
Right,
which,
right.
I think spells some quite upsetting things for Vision and the kids going forward. There might be some few tears by the finale, but yeah. and as far as for the White Vision thing goes, it's funny. My mind instantly went to Logan. I got a comparison to obviously where Hugh Jackman plays the two roles in that, where he's old man Wolverine, but then he's X-24 as well, and it's kind of the more kind of human Logan fighting against his own kind of animalistic tendencies. And it's almost like we're getting that. We've got the Vision that we follow through the show, who's obviously, he's not the original Vision, but he's Wanda's Vision, and he's the Vision that's kind of, in a lot of ways, the character that we followed throughout all these movies, and that obviously he was created by Ultron, but unlike Ultron, he wanted to destroy humanity. Vision wants to be human. All he wants is to, much like Wanda, just wants to have a house in the suburbs and be with the person he loves.
Yeah.
And then you've got this other Vision, which is almost like what the character would have been if he'd never become an Avenger and he'd never met the Scarlet Witch. He's this kind of cold and emotionless robot. And I think that having that be the kind of the physical antagonist of the show, if that's what it's going to be, I'm fully expecting we get a cool Vision versus Vision fight scene. And someone better say the Simpsons line, "I'm seeing double for Vision," or else I'll be disappointed. But I think that, I wouldn't have predicted a second Vision earlier in the show. I think we'd all kind of been focused on, obviously a lot of people speculated about Agatha Harkness, a lot of people talk about Mephisto or Nightmare. And while I still think that they could kind of be roped in some form, I don't think anyone kind of saw Vision being the villain, which is a really interesting way to kind of wrap this show up. And like every other episode, it gives us answers, but leaves us with so many more lingering questions.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I like that you brought up the fact that he was basically resurrected twice, almost against his own will, right? I mean, it is interesting because it's like the Vision that Wanda brings back is like the Vision of, that's based around like the memories and the life that they shared, but yet she sort of like stripped him of like all the memories and all the events that made him Vision. And so it's like in both instances, with her bringing it back, like the imaginary Vision in the Hex, and then with Hayward bringing in like the solely weaponized version of Vision, it's not really fair to him as a person, because it's like he's had his wishes basically defiled, even though Wanda is doing it, and she's doing it for doing it out of love, and I guess you could say therapeutic intent or whatever, because she can't have this life, so she'll make it her own. It still is like unfair to the legacy and the memory of the Vision that was there. Which is why it's interesting. It's like last week's episode, Vision is basically saying, he's like, I didn't know how much she endured, and like I feel like I'm living someone else's life, and it's because he is living someone else's life, because he's not Vision. He's just like this. He's like an idealized version of the character with all like the hard edges that made him who he was, like sanded down, and so. I'm assuming she'll obviously have to say goodbye to him, and I'm sure that'll be a very emotional scene for sure. But it's interesting how he's sort of like, as the Hex sort of gets bigger and things start to go haywire, it's like he starts to become more autonomous, and he starts to realize of just all the stuff that's going down, and it's like not okay. Like even if it means giving up his life with Wanda, I mean, it's not real. So it's like, is it really okay to keep doing this, to feed yourself this false reality? So, Vision has been like sort of like the voice of reason throughout this entire, I mean, as he always sort of is throughout this entire season. But I guess, and I don't know, Elliott, if you had anything that you wanted to add about that, but I was going to ask about, in the finale, if we think that we're going to have to say goodbye to Tommy and Billy.
Yeah, that's a great question, because again, like Owen said, I mean, if you come out of the Hex, if you were created in the Hex, it doesn't seem like you can make your way out. But again, with her being the Scarlet Witch, I mean, her limitations and her abilities seem to be, out of this world. And going off of last week with the reveal of potentially the Dark Hold, what if there is a spell to somehow take the conscious nature of these characters that she created in this Hex into, I don't know, takes Visions, what she created, and put him in his white Vision. Now, as far as Billy and Tommy goes, we'll see, man. I don't know. Again, we know, with Wiccan having similar abilities to his mom, if there's some way to, again, the comic book iteration of those characters being reabsorbed by two random kids. I don't know if they're going to go that sweaty with the comics, but it'll be really interesting to see, because, again, these are pivotal characters to the Young Avengers, even Vision to a certain extent with the West Coast Avengers. So there are still things you can do with these characters. It's going to be really interesting to see how they come out of the Hex, if there's some type of way of manipulating the Hex and, again, transferring their consciousness into, another person's body, potentially, as we can see with Vision maybe next week.
Yeah, for sure. Owen, do you think that Billy and Tommy are going to make it out, or are we going to get really sweaty and they're going to just like steal the bodies of two innocent children?
So I've been thinking about how they're going to handle that pretty much since they introduced the characters a few episodes ago. For me, I've kind of accepted that this is going to end with Wanda having to say goodbye to Vision, but kind of getting that finality and that closure that she never got, and that's going to be what kind of helps her move on and kind of repair herself. But in regards to the twins, and also Pietro, I think, because we didn't see him in this episode, we didn't really get any inkling other than Agatha mentioning fake Pietro or Fietro or whatever she was calling him. And it's funny, it made me think about, I don't know if this is going to be too weird of a tangent, but it made me think about Wonder Woman 1984 and the way that film handled Steve and Steve and Diana. Because obviously in that film, she brings Steve back, but at the end of the film, she kind of has to come to terms with, this is everything she wanted, but it's not earned and it's not right. And she kind of has to willingly give that up. And in what I think is a great scene where she has to say goodbye to him. But I'm kind of envisioning something similar where it's like, everything Wanda had wanted is to be with Vision and to have her brother back and to have, these children. And despite the fact that that's everything she wants, and given everything she's been through, she deserves it. But this isn't the right way to have it. And I think maybe she is going to have to reluctantly let it go at the end.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, go ahead, Elliott.
No, I was going to say, I was just kind of thinking back to, again, how we saw her creating Vision and kind of this hex abilities and him coming to life and being reanimated. We really, I guess, we didn't technically see how Billy and Tommy were birthed, Again, we just assumed that it was just a standard birth, but we really don't know what the situation was or how these kids came to be. So, again, knowing that we saw the actual creation of Vision and we didn't see, again, rules of screenwriting. If you don't see things, you're just left to assume that it's, some other possibilities. So however they were brought into this hex might have been completely different from Vision and could explain how they're able to make their way out of this hex, because it's a different, creation of those two characters.
Well, doesn't Agatha sort of talk about something when she's sort of like revealing like all the spells that took her like years to master? Isn't like one of them creation or something like that, or I can't even remember. And then she brings that up and or like mutation or something like that, which obviously that kind of ties into Monica Rambeau and what sort of happened with her. But I think Wanda probably like, whether it was known to her at the time, she actually like created Billy and Tommy, just on her own, which happens in the comics, I believe, or actually, I just had another idea. If they're going to go the route of Agatha being the mentor, after everything sort of happens with WandaVision, I could see perhaps, her teaching Wanda how to create, or bring back, I guess, Billy and Tommy, or bring them into like a physical form, if you will. Which seems sort of like a logical conclusion to me, at least.
Maybe I have a couple of issues with that, to be honest. I think that the end goal with this for Wanda is going to be realizing that she basically can't change the thing that's happened to her through her powers, if that makes sense. She's going to kind of, because obviously she's so much more powered now than she's ever been in the MCU before. I think that the end point, either by the end of this show or by the end of Doctor Strange 2, she's basically going to learn that the responsibility that comes with those powers, the same responsibility Strange has to kind of protect reality, she also has to share that, being one of the most powerful magic users in the universe. I think probably what's going to happen with the kids is what Elliott described as the sweaty comic book option. I think that they're going to kind of disappear when, if the hex is destroyed or the hex goes. And then I think they'll do, because obviously in the comics, Wanda and Agatha create them using pieces of Mephisto's soul, and then Doctor Strange and Agatha and the Avengers basically undo the spell and erase Wanda's memory. And then afterwards, after House of M, it's revealed that the kids are actually alive, but they're with different families. And they're not actually brothers. They are, but they've basically had their lives rebooted in a way. And I think, because obviously they established earlier in the season that a lot of the people in Westview are like missing people, or just people that have been plucked out. So I think the possibilities there, either that the kids existed before and Wanda kind of wrote them in, or whether they'll basically be placed out. My only thing with that is, in, I think it was episode 3 or 4, where they're kind of finding all of the real people in Westview and putting them on the board. In this episode, when we see Wanda arrive in Westview, all of those residents are already there. The way it was set up earlier in the show was that it was just this derelict ghost town that Wanda basically turned into an old school sitcom and populated it by just grabbing people from random corners of the country. But when she goes, and she finds the plot of land that Vision, I assume it was Vision, had bought for them, we see a lot of the characters, a lot of the background characters from the show we've seen already living there. So it is kind of like, it makes that whole creation of Westview a bit less sinister. The info earlier in the show was kind of, she kidnapped a load of people.
Well, I think it's interesting because it's showing a different perspective. And I see we have a super chat here that I'll get to in a second, but it's showing a different perspective, I guess, because a lot of the show is based around like how you're viewing the events of what happened, through which lens are you viewing it. And I think that with Vision going to some of the people and them freaking out about saying like, she's in my head, I don't know what's happening, all that stuff. That's how the people of Westview are viewing it, right? Like, because they basically have their whole lives just like warped and they're under some sort of like mind control or whatever. But like when we see Wanda going into Westview, and we see it's just like this desolated town, and just like really run down, and just like there's people there, but it's like, you know, kind of a lower, just I guess, income area and whatnot. And then Wanda goes to like this plot of land and basically like rejuvenates it, you know, by building a suburb, which is sort of its own little interesting commentary there. It is sort of like interesting that she, I don't know if she necessarily feels like she's doing a good thing, but she's like, okay, this is obviously acceptable, you know, to do it in this sort of area and whatnot. But it is sort of interesting, the two just like differing views on this. The people who had their lives uprooted by a suburban community that would just sort of like, you know, boomed overnight, which I think there's got to be something more to that right there. Like that to me is like, okay, that's an interesting sort of thread
I
to follow.
didn't kind of pick up on like the idea of it there being kind of a subtext of gentrification, but that is a brilliant reading of the text. I will give you credit for that. Yeah,
no, for sure.
And to play on that, you know, that narrative there with the town, again, we got to remember that this is only a couple weeks after the blip. So this, you know, the town was very gloomy and very dark. These people are, you know, coming back from maybe finding out, like Monica, that some of their family members didn't come back from the blip, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So it's still a very dark and gloomy world that we're in regarding this town. But also, it is something to be said about there were no kids running around the town during this, you know, the real version of Westview, which plays into this whole thing. It's for the kids. We go back to last week's episode. There was a missing kids on that milk carton, which goes to what Owen was saying in regards to, hell, maybe Agatha pulled a 7-year-old, pulled a, you know, these older versions of Billy and Tommy to play her kids. So there's something to be said about Westview and just kind of the origins of that town. And again, there's something about kids in that town, either missing or not being there and things of that nature. So Westview is a place to keep an eye out for.
Well, and that's sort of the thing, and I think Jay Manley in the chat here said, "Are we going to get closure with one more episode left?" And I can see why it would be a little, you know, why you'd be a little bit trepid about, you know, maybe seeing a finite conclusion here. But we do know that, you know, these shows and these movies sort of like bleed into one another, and so I think we'll get a satisfying emotional conclusion, but there will probably be some, you know, loose ends that either don't really matter or will be directly tied into, you know, Doctor Strange and some of the other shows going forward. I do want to address the super chat we got here from Wave876. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it. Saying, plot twist, White Vision is going to be shown as Ultron as a post-credit scene when WandaVision ends. Also, do you feel like Aaron Taylor-Johnson is coming back as Quicksilver? Owen, I'm going to let you take this one first.
Which part of that question should I answer first?
Do you think Aaron Taylor-Johnson is coming back as Quicksilver?
No. I actually think they're gonna keep Evan Peters around.
Yeah, maybe they'll yeah, that's interesting.
I was reading something yesterday where they were talking about how relatively early on in the development of WandaVision, they'd kind of decided that they wanted that version of Quicksilver to come into the MCU and to come into the show. And it's funny, you know, everyone's been sharing those the press tour of the Dark Phoenix cast interviews where they're like, oh, who'd love to be in the MCU? And Evan Peters is just like, it's funny because like I always found it was interesting that they chose to use that version of Pietro instead of the one from the MCU. Right. And to be honest, I think partly there's a story reason behind it. Like Agatha said, you know, his body was on another continent and riddled with holes.
Which that was pretty harsh. That was very graphic. Like, thanks, Agatha, you did.
Yeah. And you know, but I think there's also a thing where like, I don't think it's controversial to say that the Evan Peters version of that character is just a lot better than the Aaron Taylor-Johnson version. You know, he's a lot more, and I think part of that's just by design. You know, the MCU version of Pietro essentially existed to set up Wanda's arc into becoming an Avenger, whereas, you know, in the Fox X-Men films, Pietro is quite a big character in those later movies. He
Yeah.
basically every movie gets just 10 minutes to dance to and run around to 80s music, which is the best gig imaginable. So I actually, Evan Peters, has genuinely been outstanding in this show. The Malcolm in the Middle episode, I thought he was the absolute star of. He's, done himself no disservice coming into this show, and if anything, he's only shown even more people how good he is at bringing this character to life. And to be honest, if we're going to get any form of Quicksilver back, I would genuinely quite like it to be the Evan Peters version.
Yeah. I think there's no need for them to bring Aaron Taylor Johnson back, because they can just write a way that makes sense for Evan Peters to be back, whether it's that Agatha and Wanda figure out a way to actually make him a real boy again, or something of that nature, or whatever. But I feel like it is, now that he's been introduced in the series as Quicksilver, they're not going to backtrack and go, oh wait, no, he's back. Aaron Taylor Johnson's back, guys. He's not going anywhere. So I just feel like they've just sort of accepted this new version. Now, I mean, if he's going to be in the MCU going forward after this, I mean, I have no idea. I think that's still sort of up in the air. But to me, Evan Peters is just now the definitive Quicksilver. It doesn't matter if we're talking X-Men or MCU now. He is Quicksilver. As for the first part of this question, about whether White Vision is going to be shown as Ultron, I mean, I don't think he's going to be Ultron. I think he's going to be an Ultron-like figure. They're not just going to recreate Ultron again, because obviously that didn't go well the first time. So they're going to try and make it better, do what Stark couldn't do, I guess, the first time around. So he's, I don't know, I feel like it's going to be Vision, but just devoid of the I guess the human, the elements from the Soul Stone that basically allowed him to have free will and all that. This Vision is just, he's just going to be a weapon or whatever. So yeah, I don't think we're going to get him as Ultron or anything like that.
Can I just answer that question with another question?
Yes.
Just going back to the Quicksilver thing, obviously, we've got one more episode left. A lot of people are speculating it's going to be a bumper episode. It could be an hour or so, because obviously I think we're going to get a lot of action. We're getting Vision on Vision action. We're getting Wanda and Agatha doing all crazy hand stuff. Okay, I'm just going to start theorizing right now, if this is okay with you two fine gentlemen. Everyone's fighting, sort of flying in everywhere. Visions are flying through buildings. The hex is shattering. All the people are going to die. And then some. Blue Monday by New Order starts playing and everything starts. Are we going to get a Quicksilver scene?
Yeah, I think we are. I really do.
That's kind of a big part of that version of the character. Is each time he has a scene where he just, everything slows down. What he's had, what 80s songs could we play? White Wedding by Billy Idol starts playing. And he just,
it has to be 80s music.
Great banger they can get the rights to. Then he just, I just have this vision in my head, no pun intended, of kind of the hex crumbling around everyone, and Pietro just going through and grabbing all of the people and taking them outside the hex. That's gotta happen.
Well, I will say this, and again, a pretty substantial. Well, I don't know. It's a spoiler warning if you haven't been paying in depth to the WandaVision stuff, and if you don't want anything potentially ruined for you, I can understand if you want to click away. But I'll give you guys just a quick little heads up here. Okay, so there was a rumored leak that Quicksilver is going to have another scene in the finale. Whether or not that happens, I mean, sometimes these leaks have been right. Sometimes they've been basically fan fiction. So, we'll see what happens there. But I don't think it would be that out of the realm of possibility to assume that he would have a scene like that, because it is, again, an integral part of the character. But it's also just sort of well, if Agatha is the one that's sort of controlling him, can he have autonomy beyond what Agatha is doing, right? Like, is he actually like a real person, you know?
Yeah, the way I'm visualizing it is just kind of the same like Vision, some of the other characters. He kind of phases through his head, kind of flicks the switch, and then we're kind of, he's like, oh, where's the professor? Where's Magneto? You know, what's going on here? And then like someone suggested in the chat, You Spin Me Right Round by Dead or Alive starts playing, and watch out, here he comes. It's going to be I told myself I'm not going to get my hopes up, and here we are.
I can't see it not happening. But Elliot, go ahead. I knew you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say, yeah, Vision. It plays within the show. You know, the narrative's already been created. Once you kind of break out of this hex from Vision, I think he's going to kind of snap back into his, you know, regular Quicksilver-ness and his nature of the character, and we're going to get that moment. I think it's, like you said, Griff, I think there was a leak out there that suggested that we can probably expect something of that nature. And when we get that, and I mean, we're talking about the 80s songs. I mean, this show has created its own nice kind of soundtrack, so maybe we'll get this original type of song within that moment. But I think, I don't want to say guaranteed, but I'm pretty confident that we'll see some type of X-Men version of Quicksilver doing the thing that we've seen him do in, you know, Days of Future Past and Apocalypse. I think we're geared for that, and that's going to be a great scene.
Yeah, because you imagine if they like wrote a Quicksilver theme like they did for Agatha and everything, but it's like him saving people to the Quicksilver theme. That would be
number one on the pop charts.
Yeah, right.
Speeding all the way up to number one.
Yeah, right. That'd be so wild.
Nothing will ever top the Agatha theme, because that is the unquestionable pop of 2021 so far. But if Quicksilver's going to have a musical number, he has to be singing it himself as he's saving people. You know, he's in slow motion. He's running around. You know, he goes into a house. Someone's, you know, grabs a drink out the fridge as he's going through, grabs someone, and he's singing the Quicksilver song.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm just sort of like assuming that there's a good chance that we'll get something like that. I don't know whether it's like 100% certain, but like if I had to bet money, I'd say, yeah, they'll probably throw one in there. I guess the other question is like, how long do we think this finale is going to be? Is it going to be an hour? Is it going to be a little longer than an hour? I mean, they have a lot to wrap up, you know, like this episode was necessary and it was really important. And I'm glad that they made this as the penultimate, because it really like teased everything up for an incredible finale. But it does sort of like leave them in a position where there is like so much story left to sort of conclude. Can they do it in a fulfilling and successful way in the finale? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't see it being like exactly an hour. If history repeats itself, I think we might see an hour on the time code, but it'd be like 49 minutes worth of, you know, credits and a post-credit scene, if not one or two. So I think we're going to get the longest episode to answer your question, of the season. Now, as far as it crossing the exact hour mark, I don't know if we'll get that. Fingers crossed, but I think we're going to be somewhere in the realm of like 48 to 55 minutes, like of footage of the show.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, I mean, if we're going off of The Mandalorian, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Owen.
Yeah, I'm kind of expecting the same. I think that because there's not only a lot to resolve, but there's a lot of action that I think is going to happen in this. Obviously, I think there's going to be some sort of big magic fight between Wanda and Agatha, you know, to get the kids. I think there's going to be some Vision on Vision action. I think we've seen stuff from the trailers where it looks like the sword cars are kind of coming into Westview, so I think they could be in on the. So I think there's going to be a few decent action set pieces to fit in there, and then as well you kind of got wrapping everything up, or at least enough that ties things in neatly going into Doctor Strange 2. So I think it's got to be, you know, not counting the credits, I think you've got to be looking at least 45 minutes here.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to the rumor? I was gonna say, is there any truth to the rumor of the 10th secret episode?
No. Yeah, I've seen that going around. I saw that on Twitter earlier. I think that's just some poor communication on the Disney Twitter account's behalf.
Yeah.
It was like 2 episodes left, and it's like, and it's a trailer for this week's episode. I think that, and a lot of people have kind of took that as there's an extra episode. Whereas to me, that's kind of like counting the one you should go and watch right now. But yeah, they've not really helped themselves in fueling that speculation, should we say.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. That's a secret episode. I don't know. I feel like they need that week-long break in between WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier just to sort of like cleanse the palate, because they are two like drastically different shows here. Like, I mean, one is like sort of going on like the socially politically charged I guess kind of spy action movie. I don't really know what's going on there, but it's like that sort of thing. And then you've got like this really high concept, like weird, wacky, like intimate character study exploring grief and trauma, and it just like the two they couldn't be any more different. And so like having that week to just sort of like breathe and reset before going into Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think is very important. And so I don't think that I wouldn't want them to force like, a surprise episode in between. Nor do I think that's even within the realm of possibility, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But all right, we're going to start wrapping up here, guys. But again, be sure to jump down to the comment section. Let us know what you thought of today's episode, your thoughts, your theories. How do you think they're going to wrap this thing up in a finale? And do you think it's going to be a satisfying finale? That is the big question of the day here. But yeah, starting with you, Elliott, final thoughts on the episode, and what are you looking forward to most in the finale?
Again, man, just kind of talking with you all. I think this is, like I said, my favorite episode of the series. And again, just some great stuff from origins-wise from Agatha as well as Wanda. And the performances of Wanda, Elizabeth Olsen, and all those flashback scenes, taking it back with her accent, diving into the scene that she gets at the Avengers compound. Vision was incredible. The sword moment of kind of her having that great callback to Infinity War where she says, "All I do is feel you," and then she goes back to the operating table and she feels nothing. Such a powerful moment for that character. And, she was already one of my favorite Avengers, but man, this show has just definitely put her in that top tier for me. And again, just applause to the entire cast. But Elizabeth Olsen has been slaying this performance. But in regards to just overall predictions for next week, as we all kind of alluded to, I imagine, as Paul Bettany mentioned before the show began, this has the Avengers in-game budget to it in regards to VFX and special effects and all that stuff and action. So I think we're going to get, as everyone's been kind of, I guess, dying for, is an action-heavy type of episode, which I've been loving the character development, but of course it's MCU, so we're going to see some, third act type of in-game levels of fighting, Vision on Vision, who knows, Quicksilver on another Quicksilver coming in the mix, but we'll see what comes down with this Luke Skywalker character, the engineer. Are we going to get Blue Marvel come into the mix? There's so much to go with next week's finale, the Luke Skywalker moment, and will Doctor Strange make an appearance? Will Doctor Strange be, as they say, Luke Skywalker? Will he be training a apprentice and a Jedi who needs to learn how to use the Sith powers in Wanda, and him taking on this mentorship of his own? So I'm expecting fireworks next week, guys, and I'm excited for next week's finale.
Yeah, I just briefly before we go to Owen, I think the Doctor Strange, I'm like taking everything that Paul Bettany has ever said now with like a massive grain of salt, and like thinking that he's just like being a cheeky dick about it. Not like a dick, but just like funny, just trolling with it. So I think the Avengers Endgame level budget, maybe scale it down just a little bit, and then we'll get a nice action heavy climax. The Luke Skywalker cameo is probably just Paul Bettany in white, so there's that. I don't know. I mean, everyone's saying like, "Oh, Doctor Strange is gonna come in here," and like I'm not convinced anymore that Strange is going to make an appearance in the finale. But anyways, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, if I had to predict if we get any Strange, I'm starting to think it might be like a post-credit scene in the finale.
Yeah.
Like after everything's done, we might get something where like Strange shows up and finds Wanda, or Strange is kind of just like doing something else, and we just kind of get like a reminder of Strange and kind of establish that link between him and Wanda going into Multiverse of Madness. I don't actually think we're probably going to see him in the finale. We could, but I think you've already got enough to wrap up with the characters that we've already got. I don't know if it's the place to really add anyone in. So I think maybe we just get like a little stinger at the end.
Yeah, well, here I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen. I think that we're going to get Doctor Strange and Wanda at the end of this episode go kill Chiwetel Ejiofor's Baron Mordo, take over his throne, and then we're going to get a title card that says The Book of Strange. And then we're going to get this surprise spin-off series of Doctor Strange leading up to the Multiverse of Madness. Anyways, Owen,
and then John Krasinski shows up as Mephisto.
Yeah, there's the surprise. Not Mr. Fantastic.
I've heard John Krasinski showing up, and I've heard Mephisto showing up. So,
yeah,
2 birds, 1 stone. John Krasinski showing up as Mephisto. You heard it here first.
I hope it happens. I really do. He's tall, he's lanky, and paint him in red, and he looks like the devil. So,
and he's a demon.
He is an absolute demon. Owen, going back to you, just sort of closing thoughts on the episode here.
Yeah, I thought this was a tremendous episode. Like I said, knowing it was going to be quite heavily flashbacks, I kind of tempered my expectations. But then I remembered that Elizabeth Olsen has basically been for the last 8 episodes going, you know what? I think I do deserve an Emmy, so I'm just gonna crush this like I have done every episode previously. This is generally one of my favorite episodes in the show. I love the scenes, the scene especially with her and Vision in the compound. I got chills when Vision said, what is grief if not love persevering? That is such a poetic line, and it's kind of haunted me all day. And yeah, I think it did a great job of setting up the finale. I think a lot of exciting kind of answers to questions and a lot of questions that we need answering. And, Paul Bettany being, like you said, a cheeky bugger, as us fellow Brits would describe him. And, Avengers level budget. How much does it cost to see Paul Bettany play with himself for an hour? I guess we'll find out next week.
Well, be careful there. What kind of show is this turning into?
Well, they've just launched this new Star thing on Disney Plus for R.
There you go.
What better way to get everyone's eyes over on Star than Paul Bettany?
Bettany on Bettany.
Hey, I mean,
like
the true question is, Joss Whedon wanted to have a particular part on Vision in Age of Ultron, so maybe we'll finally see that cut make its way into the MCU.
Well, yeah, him being rebirthed, as this white Vision, it now gives him the opportunity to correct the mistakes of the original Vision, and I see this addition of a male anatomy part. I think that's likely to be the case here.
Just go all the way with it. Make his body look like George Clooney's batsuit, just completely anatomically correct.
Yeah,
I want Schumacher Vision.
Schumacher Vision. There we go. But guys, thank you so much as always for tuning into this review, breakdown, recap of WandaVision episode 8. As always, be sure to let us know your thoughts and opinions on the episode down in the comments section below. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to give this video a like, share with your WandaVision Marvel loving friends, and subscribe to the FilmSpeak channel so you don't miss out on more WandaVision recaps. And not just WandaVision, but we're going to go into Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then we're going to go into Loki, and then we're going to cover all of this MCU stuff on television here. So be sure to stay subscribed to the FilmSpeak channel so you don't miss out on all that coverage. Thank you to my 2 guests for joining me today, Elliott and Owen. Elliott, where can everyone find you?
Hey, man, as I say every single week, it's such a pleasure to talk WandaVision with the Griffin. Again, teaming up with Owen is always a pleasure as well. So, yeah, guys, you can find me here on YouTube at Movie Files, talking about shows like WandaVision, your latest movies, and all that different stuff. So check me out there. And then on Instagram at Movie Files, on Twitter at Movie Files Live. And just the other day, I decided to become a millennial of sorts and start a TikTok. So check me out on TikTok at Movie Files. So let's have some fun.
What do you got going there on TikTok? I'm curious. What are you posting?
Man, it's a pretty creative outlet in regards to just like little things I don't do on my channel, like rankings of certain movies or talking into certain Easter eggs of shows like WandaVision. So it's a cool little way of, 30 seconds, 15 seconds of just having fun, and not doing a silhouette challenge or doing a dance-off challenge or something on TikTok. It's just a cool way to just kind of explore different, pop culture stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, go give him a follow on TikTok. Owen, where can everyone find you?
It's funny you say that. I also have a TikTok account now.
Oh,
the only difference is I don't know how to post things on there. So if either of you find Jen to show me how to and possibly do a sea shanty, I would greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, I will. We'll try and help you out with that.
Thanks for having me on. Like you had a choice in it. I kind of just showed up here.
Okay.
Through like Pietro came through the multiverse. But yeah, thanks for having me on. If you want some more of me, you can head over to youtube.com/OwenLikesComics. I have a video dropping next Thursday all about one of the biggest inspirations behind the WandaVision TV show. That is Tom King's incredible 12-issue comic book series, Vision. It's the story where Vision builds himself a lovely android family, buys a nice house in the suburbs, and just like the show, nothing could go wrong. It's just happiness. Lots of nice things happen. It's definitely not a book that is very sad, but it's great. And yeah, Thursday, new video out on it. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, just at Owen Likes Comics. I'm too old to be saying these things.
And sadly, you're younger than both of us. So actually, I was gonna say I'm really looking forward to that Tom King video. So definitely go give that a watch. When it comes out, because Tom King's Vision is by far one of my favorite comic runs of all time, and you can definitely see its influence in WandaVision. So definitely check that out when it drops on Owen's channel. Lastly, guys, from me, you have a WandaVision video essay to look forward to next Wednesday. Deep dive and analysis of this incredible show, why I think it's absolutely pitch perfect. But until then, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. Thank you guys so much for sticking around and interacting with us in the chat and all that good stuff. And we will catch you next time. Take care.